I'm trying something new with my hair. I don't know if I like it, but we're experimenting and everything's fine. Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name is Shaki and today I'm going to be doing something that I've wanted to do for quite a long time, and that is to rate John Green's books from my least favourite to my most favourite. Now, as most of you know, I did the Greenathon in 2019, so I'll leave all the relevant links down below. And basically what the Greenathon was a whole year of me and a few other people who also partook in the Greenathon. We just read every single one of John Green's books and we talked about it, I reviewed it on my channel, and we just kind of like celebrated John Green's writing. So I do have reviews for most of John Green's books apart from Let It Snow. Because it got to the end of the year, the end of the readathon, and I didn't really like Let It Snow, but we'll get on to that in a minute. But for every other John Green book, I do have a full-length review on my channel. I think for two of the books as well, I have live shows with relevant guests as well. So I'll link all of that in the description down below. But for this video, I'm going to be doing an idea I had bouncing off of the Greenathon, and that was to reread all of John Green's books and then rank them from my personal best to my personal worst. So we're going to go from the worst to the best. I think you all know what the best is, but we're going to go there anyway, and we're going to work our way through it. Here is my John Green shelf. I will be using this as reference. I've already said I don't like this book that much, and I didn't even like it enough to post a review of it, and that is Let It Snow, which is cooperatively written by John Green, Maureen Johnson and Lauren Miracle. So if you don't know what Let It Snow is, it's basically a collection of 3 short stories by each author, which just kind of happen around Christmas and during a snowstorm. Originally I gave this a 3.5, and then on my reread I actually DNF'd and I didn't give it a rating because I didn't finish it, and I just couldn't finish it. I got to the second story, I believe, and I was just done. I was just done. I just feel like on my second time reading, my suspension of disbelief wasn't large enough. It wasn't stretchy enough to stretch to the kind of disbelief that I needed to like this story anymore. And it's just not for me anymore. And I used to fit into that demographic, but unfortunately I just don't anymore. There were just loads of tropes in here that I just really didn't like. Jubilee's storyline fell into the I'm not like other girls story. It's just one of my very least favourite things to exist, even in real life. And also cheerleaders are like a running theme, and it's just really cliche and really like teen related. So if you're a teen watching this and you're thinking about reading Let It Snow, maybe you would like it, but unfortunately I didn't, and I DNF'd, which is why it is at number 7. Bottom of the pile. Next on my list, second from the bottom, might actually surprise you, and that is The Fault in Our Stars, obviously by John Green. Again, I used to really like this book, and for me it just was a little bit meh. I do have a really big fear when it comes to rereading books that I won't like them in the same way, and unfortunately The Fault in Our Stars has fell a victim to that. If you don't know what The Fault in Our Stars is about, it's basically about Hazel Grace Lancaster, who has an uncurable mutation of cancer, but she is dying. There is no way to cure her, or she thinks she's dying, and she's just living every day as it comes. And her mum suggests that she starts attending a support group for kids like her, for kids with cancer. At this support group, she meets so many new friends in the heart of Jesus, and one of them being Augustus Waters, who she forms a romantic relationship with. Speaking of that, I think my main problem with this is the kind of relationship that Gus and Hazel have and the nature of the relationship. So in my Goodreads review, I write a lot about everything, and even in my review of The Fault in Our Stars, I write a lot about my feelings, but I think one of the main things I had that was wrong with it was Gus and how kind of like controlling he was, and the fact that he couldn't control where his life was going because of his illness or his ex-illness, and he kind of just had to control everything else in his life. So like Hazel, if she said that she wasn't interested, he would just show up everywhere and she'd be like, what are you doing here? Why are you here? And I don't really think that is the best way to portray teen romances or teen relationships, especially not this one, as vulnerable as it is. I also feel like we should probably draw a line between giving storylines like this the representation that they deserve and romanticizing illness and kids with cancer. I think we should draw a line because this book started a wave of fiction, a trend in fiction where they write about people who are sick and falling in love. It's tragic and heartbreaking, but really loving at the same time. And I don't know where we draw the line between romanticizing sickness and cancer of all things and giving it the representation it deserves. Not all storylines about illness or cancer have to be romantic and tragic and make you want to cry at the end and just forget about love even existed. Some things that I did like about The Fault in Our Stars, I really liked Hazel's character. I will say that I loved Hazel, and I think that John Green does a really good job of writing female protagonists. He doesn't do it very often, but in this instance and all the rest of the instances that he does a really, really good job. I didn't feel uncomfortable with Hazel in any way. I do think that she was quite difficult at some times, but I think if you were dying, then you would be a tiny bit difficult. I also really liked her and Gus as separate characters, but unfortunately, the relationship as a whole wasn't as cute as I remembered it to be. Next on my list is Will Grayson, which is another collaborative text written by John Green and David Levithan. We do have a live show of this. This is one of 2 books of John Green's that we do have a live show of for the Greenathon, so I'll link that down below. We had some quite polarizing opinions on the live show, and I'm just going to kind of reiterate my opinions on that, and then you can have your own and we'll just agree to disagree. Oh, I forgot to say that I gave The Fault in Our Stars a 3 stars, just saying. I gave it a 3.25 stars. Now, the rating in this video might become a little bit confusing because technically this should be above the book I'm about to say next, but for me personally, I didn't jive with it as much as I wanted to, even though that the rating is what it is, and I feel like that deserves that, but personally, I don't feel like I liked it enough to put up further in the list, if that makes sense. Before my reread, I originally gave this a 2 stars, and when I looked at that, I was really anxious for my reread. But in fact, I actually really liked this. So if you don't know what this is about, it's about 2 teens called Will Grayson, and one of them is gay, one of them is straight, and we follow basically just the 2 perspectives of both the Will Graysons in John Green's writing style and also David Levithan's writing style, and how they come together and cross paths. One of the things I absolutely loved about this book and why it got a high rating from me is the whole friendship dynamic and the fact that Will Grayson is in John Green's Will Grayson. This might get confusing. John Green's Will Grayson is number 1 and then David Levithan's Will Grayson is number 2. Just to clear that up, I'm going to say that now so it doesn't get too confusing. So Will Grayson 1, John Green's Will Grayson. The friendship element between him, Will Grayson, and Tiny was one of my absolute favourites. The friendship just represents a realistic friendship. It has highs, it has lows, but it's never unhealthy, and I feel like the relationship between them both, the friendship, was really well done. And honestly, I think that there is a huge gap in YA fiction where friendship storylines should be like this. To be honest, I found most of the rest of the characters quite depressing. Between fat shaming, just being general assholes, and internalized homophobia, they were all quite a lot to deal with, which I don't think is a big pattern in John Green's books. In John Green's books, for me, I do tend to like his characters because they're relatable, they're not perfect, they're morally grey sometimes, but for me, I don't really like his collaborative works because sometimes his characters just turn into assholes. I did also find some structural issues in Will Grayson as well, so like new speak and new line wasn't always followed, and sometimes basic punctuation and capital letters weren't used. In saying that, I know that this is sometimes used to distinguish between the 2 writers' points of views and their styles, but if you are so similar in writing that the only way that you can, you know, portray that, oh, it's a different writer this time, is uses of basic structure being broken, I don't think you're doing the right job. All in all, I think it was an okay, solid read, but for me personally, I just noticed way too many things wrong with it this time around. I blasted through this, and some of the characters and their relationships are really nice and complex, but for the most part they were assholes, and basic structural expectations that I had going in was the only way to differentiate between the point of views, which isn't really how it should be. Apart from Will Grayson 2 being so depressed and so internally homophobic. Come on now, come on. The next book on my list, getting a little bit into the top of the list now, and that is KATHERINE'S, obviously by John Green. I keep going to say by John Green, well obviously the whole video is about John Green. So I enjoyed this book. I thought it was fine. I gave it 3 stars, and now again you're probably confused as to why I rated Will Grayson underneath this when I actually technically gave it a 0.25 star higher rating than this one. But personally, I just prefer this one, even though it's not like a higher rated book. I just personally liked it better than Will Grayson. And besides, it's not that much of a high rating anyway. It was a bit tricky. They all kind of seemed the same kind of rating, and so that is the rating and the ranking I decided on. So if you didn't know, An Abundance of Katherines follows Colin Singleton, who has a lot of girlfriends all named Katherine, and he is quite the nerd, quite the scientist, so he comes up with a whole graph and a whole theory of how to predict how a relationship will go. Who will be the dumper and who will be the dumpee. Colin is so sick of being dumped by Katherines all the time, so him and his friend, I can't remember what his name is, Hassan! Yes! Oh my god, the best thing about this book! Colin and his friend Hassan go on this massive road trip to a different side of the world to meet other women, but really they just learn more about themselves and them as a friendship. You know I like a good book about friendship, so we vibed with this one. Honestly, on my reread, I loved this more than I was expecting. I've kind of always thought this was one of John Green's underrated novels, and I proved myself right. I loved Colin's character and how dorky he was. I absolutely adored how he was so nerdy and a scientist and coming up with like a theory about being dumped. There's loads of footnotes in this book explaining some things and having some graphs, and I thought it was a really cool aspect. A lot of people didn't like it, but I did, and it made me like Colin's character even more. Although I liked Colin as a character, I feel like his storyline and the things that happen to him, sure, they aren't the most realistic, but I was able to suspend my disbelief a little bit more for this book than any other book, like Let It Snow, for example. Sure, him dating loads of girls named Katherine, and by loads, I specifically mean 19 girls called Katherine, is a bit far-fetched. That probably wouldn't happen in real life, but it was nice to read about, and I knew that it was fiction, but I liked it so much, I liked Colin so much that I wanted to keep on reading. Again, I feel like Colin and Hassan had a really realistic and great friendship. There were sad moments, there were happy moments, there was rejoiceful moments, there was remorseful moments where people said that the things they don't mean, and I loved the portrayal of friendship again in this one as well. The whole concept of like the tampon factory wasn't that interesting to me, and I didn't really pay attention to those parts, but I did really like the characters, and that's what kind of kept me going. I do think that some of John Green's books haven't aged that well, and we haven't spoken about that in this video just yet, but there is a really inconsiderate anorexia description joke about one of the main characters, and I just didn't get that because I have had issues with eating in the past, and I think it was very insensitive. But other than that, it was a good, solid read, and I actually really enjoyed it more than I was expecting to. It did get 3 stars, which isn't a bad rating, but I feel like it could have been better, but at the same time, the characters were just sublime, and I really liked it for that reason. Now, this next one, you are as surprised as I am that this is this high up in this list, and that is Paper Towns. Now, I have a notorious representation for preferring Looking for Alaska over Paper Towns. Spoiler alert for the rest of the list. But I actually enjoyed this quite a lot, and that is why it is number 3 on my least to most favourite John Green books. I actually ended up giving Paper Towns a 3.85 stars, which is significantly more than the lower rated ones on this list. So if you don't know, then this book, Paper Towns, is about Quentin, who again is a nerd, and he's, you know, that outcast boy who no girls could ever like him, and then a really interesting girl likes him, and they go on this wild goose chase. Exactly like that. Quentin, aka Q, has a very big, large, humongous crush on Margot, his mysterious best friend. I, to be honest, really didn't like Margot that much, but I really liked Quentin and Q, and the rest of the cast of characters he brings in to going to find Margot after she's gone missing. A few weeks pass since Margot has gone missing, and they all kind of think it's like a prank, but Quentin has this harrow feeling that something has gone deadly wrong. I didn't really post anything about why I love this so much on Goodreads, which is what I'm like referring to right now, but I do have a whole review. I think what I did like was some parts of the mental health representation and Quentin's character as a whole, but I have really insignificant notes, and I'm sorry, but I did like this, which is why it is 3rd on the list. As we come to our top 2 books on this list, I am so thrilled that I get to talk about this book another time. I have just said nothing but good things about this book on my channel for a long time. I've read this now 3 times, and I have enjoyed it equally every single time, and that is Turtles All the Way Down. Now, this is a book that also has a review on my channel and a live show, so I'll go ahead and link you to that. But this is just one of my favourite books, period, let alone just of John Green. I gave this a 4 stars, and it's basically about Aza, who has OCD, and she is trying to just kind of like stay sane and also deal with her best friend Daisy's antics. So Aza has a long history with a little rich boy called David, whose father goes missing, and the reward for finding David's lost father is so extraordinary in amounts of money that Aza and Daisy are trying to basically get the money. And in doing that, Aza kind of catches feelings for David, or does she? That is the question. So this is a story about first loves and mental health, and can I just say that the OCD representation in here is really good. I've heard from other people that have OCD that it's really good, but for me personally, the anxiety side of it and like the obtrusive thoughts, the obsessive thoughts, the anxiety that comes with OCD, that was really, really good. I have been diagnosed with both social anxiety and generalized social situation anxiety, just generalized anxiety in general, and I can say that the representation for that was really accurate, and I'm so glad that this book exists. There was also some depersonalization rep as well. I'm not sure if anyone else got that kind of vibe, but I definitely did, and that was really well done as well. The book is also full of Star Wars references, so if you enjoy Star Wars, you probably will get them, and I did as well, because Daisy, Arthur's best friend, is a fan fiction writer for Rey and Chewbacca fan fiction. Didn't know I needed it in my life, but I definitely did. Those references kind of just give this book a little bit of an edge, because it is so sad and so heavy. The Star Wars references and Daisy and Arthur's friendship just give that a little bit of comedy gold. In saying that, I think again that the friendship element between Arthur and Daisy is really well done, really realistic. They come from different backgrounds, they don't understand each other 100% of the time, and they communicate and argue, and I think that is perfect. It's crazy how you can reread a book and just need it in different ways than the first time that you read it, and every single time that you reread it after that, you gain a different response from it and different knowledge from it every time, and you relate to different parts because you've had different experiences since the last time you reread it. And I just feel like this book, and also the book I'm about to talk about, have that effect on me personally, and I love this book with all of my heart. And last but certainly not least, and I'm sure everyone was expecting this, but my number one favourite John Green book is Looking for Alaska. Obviously! Now this is the stunning edition that came with the Hulu series that was made, and I am actually obsessed with it. I gave this obviously a 5 out of 5 stars. I first read this when I was 13, and it taught me a lot about myself that I didn't even know was a thing yet. And I just fell head over heels for these characters, the writing, the story. I love this book, and I have done for about 7 years now. I think this is my either 12th or 13th reread of this book, and it's basically about Pudge, aka Miles, who goes off to a different boarding school to get away from his parents, to get away from his same old town. He wants to go and explore basically and find his great perhaps. He goes to Culver Creek, which is a boarding school, and it's notoriously known for its pranks. He meets loads of friends, Takumi, the Colonel, and most importantly, Alaska Young. Anything else that is related to the plot that I could tell you to make your reading experience a little bit more enhanced would probably spoil the actual book, and I think it's better to know with Looking for Alaska. The less that you know, the more that you'll get out of it. It's just best to not know a lot. So if you're going to read this for the first time, I would really recommend staying away from reviews of it until you read it afterwards, until you can like vent your heart out to the rest of the world. This book has a lot of trigger warnings, and I will say that right here, right now. It also does have some language that is kind of like outdated, so we do have some characters who say some really mean stuff, and it isn't challenged, but I do think that John Green doesn't think like that anymore, just like all of the other, you know, language and stuff and plot points that haven't aged well in John Green novels. But onto the trigger warnings, there are loads of mental health kind of themes in here. Depression, we've got alcoholism, smoking a lot, and also possible suicide. I do think that you should definitely be careful going into books like Looking for Alaska, just because of how heavy it is, like Turtles All the Way Down. One of the main things that I love about this book is its characters. Oh my god, the characters do make it, and I'm not even sorry to say that. I love the characters so much. I see myself reflected in Miles and Alaska, and even the Colonel at times, because they are literally like my family, and seeing them on screen for this Hulu series was just magical, and I think it couldn't have been done better, honestly. It was so good. I find Miles' character extremely interesting because he gives into peer pressure quite a lot, and he also memorizes all of these dead people's final words, and he's just a really interesting guy. This book is about seeking your great perhaps, finding your purpose in the world, grieving, and about religion and death and where we go after we die, and the meaning of life. It's also about troubled teens trying to find their way in society and acting a lot older than they are, which is a common theme in John Green's books. The plot kind of like does drag along, and you have to really be invested in the characters to carry on with the book. I will say that if you're a plot driven person, maybe this isn't for you, but I personally love the characters. I love learning about them, I love reading them, I love being in their points of views, in their shoes, and this book just gives me a whole lot of happiness. I love this book so much. And there you have it. There are my rankings for all of John Green's books. I know that no one asked for this video, but I've been wanting to make it since I finished the Greenathon, and here it finally is. But that is all from me. I really hope that you enjoyed. Give this video a like and a subscribe if you want to, if you liked it that much. And also comment down below one of your favourite John Green books or characters, or even rank your own John Green books in an order that you want. I won't be offended, I promise. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!